but you're ready to assess whoever stood and passed through. And then after you say, I'm better. But you come in the arena and you see what it takes. So I believe I want to encourage elites and the well-educated and the wealthy and the businessmen. I see in America, I see where billionaires are going to parliament. In Uganda, billionaires, you're saying, no, if I go into politics, I'm exposing my money. Okay? So how are you going to protect it if you can't come and give ideas on how you can protect that money? So on the issues of representation, I believe the Constitution did a wonderful thing. Each one of you has an opportunity. Please don't despise your representatives when you cannot go and challenge them. Finally, I think we still have, of course, a lot to work on as a country. And also this, by the way, we've had a very big debate on the issue of numbers of parliament. They also concern me because the cost of administration in this country, I want to be honest, is so high, is extremely high. It is something we have to maybe one day take a bold step and look into. Overall, the cost of finding that, I remember when we were young, a policeman says, I will beat you and government will pay. Okay? I'll beat you and government will pay. I'm permanent and pensionable. Whether one works or not, the process, no process of accountability in public service, they are so tight, I don't know what we can do to ensure that maybe public service or public servants are on contract. They sign performance contracts. If you don't perform, you go. We have very many unemployed people. But the issue of the numbers in Parliament, the other day we were talking and someone said, but look, even the Constitution, I don't think you have fulfilled the requirements of the Constitution of all marginalized groups being represented in Parliament. All marginalized. Now, even the poor are going to say, we are marginalized, we are poor, you're not considering. And people are forming their own groups now with the advent of circles, associations. We are going to have more and more and more and more coming up. But I think we make a lot fit in society, not society fit in a role. Our Constitution is a living document. Now, it must move with the times. Some of the amendments, one might not agree with them. Yes, but last time, sir, I gave an example of the issue of age limit, where personally my view, and I put it on the floor, my view was very, very clear. I believe in term limits, I don't believe in age limit. Because you see, when you talk of age limit, now I gave an example of President Kabila. He became a president of the DRC. I think he was around 31 years. So if you are using the age limit of Uganda, which was 75 years, that people were fighting about, then it means President Kabila would legitimately be a president in DRC for 44 years without you questioning. Colonel Stresser in Sierra Leone, I think he became a president at around 26 years. So it would mean that for 49 years he's legitimately a president without you questioning anything. So that's why some of us believe that, well, some of the amendments, I wasn't there when they amended the Constitution to remove term limits. I've read the arguments. Some are interesting, some I don't know. I was there for age limit, and I supported age limit amendment. And up to now, even if we have to argue like how long, I would stand by that. That I believe in term limits, I don't believe in age limit. So we still have gaps that we have to work on. The issue of the 2/3 gender rule, it is something which we have not yet fully addressed, but I believe compared to the rest of Africa and the rest of the world, we are making very, very good progress, and very many other issues to do with governance, which I believe a constitution being a living document, we shall slowly look into them. I want to thank you for listening.
Right, Honorable, before you take your seat, I would request that we get a photo opportunity. Dr. Sarah, Board Chair, our keynote speaker. Photo opportunity on the banner right there on the left. Yes. Okay. This conversation is live on Civic Space TV and on UBC TV, the national stuff. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the group photo session is over, and as our chief guest walks out, I'd like to acknowledge that in our midst we have representatives from the following: the Uganda Law Reform Commission, the Justice Law and Order sector. We also have representatives from the Justice Access Point, Action Aid Uganda, HRCU, GIZ, and PFF, that's the People's Front for Freedom. Thank you very much. May we give an applause for those who've just joined us. We do appreciate you for making it. We know the program started a little earlier, and that's perhaps why we don't have everyone here yet. I've also seen Mr. Henry Muguzi, Alliance for Finance Monitoring. Henry, you're most welcome. Ms. Perry Aritua, I can see you. We also have Mr. Marcus Ogenga from the Eastern Horn of Africa Election Observers Network. He traveled from Nairobi to be with us here. Thank you very much, Marcus. We do appreciate all of you in your individual capacities. Professor Mambusi Debesa, you're most welcome. Dr. Robert Ojambo from Chambogo University, we do appreciate you. Thank you very much. I can also see Council Aaron Kiza. I also see Mr. Patrick Karamaji. Thank you very much. I'll also be acknowledging the rest of you as I get to get a sense of exactly who is here. We would now move to the next item, which is our keynote speaker, but I would also momentarily wait for Dr. Sarah Bireti to come in here. But just very briefly about our keynote speaker, His Lordship Johan Kriegler, is Justice Emeritus, Constitutional Court of South Africa, and former head of South Africa's Independent Electoral Commission. In 1994, Justice Kriegler is an internationally renowned figure in constitutional law and democratic transition. He is specifically recommended for this event because of his pivotal role in South Africa's foundational post-apartheid period. His service on South Africa's highest court cemented his reputation as a defender of constitutionalism and human rights. As the founding chairman of the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa in 1994, he was responsible for overseeing South Africa's first fully democratic, non-racial election. His experience in ensuring the integrity and independence of a crucial constitutional body directly aligns with the conference theme of strengthening institutions. His expertise is directly relevant to Uganda's Electoral Commission and the constitutional issues surrounding electoral integrity and judicial review. And Justice Krekla's address will offer an invaluable comparative perspective, drawing on his experience in managing a constitutional transition and establishing the independence of core democratic institutions, which directly aligns with the conference theme of strengthening institutions. Justice Johan, you're most welcome to deliver your keynote address, and may we be attentive and drink from your cup of wisdom.
Facilitator Judith, having heard that introduction, I can hardly wait to hear me. I sincerely hope I can offer 1/10 of what you promised on my behalf, but let's see how we go. An opening thank you to you, Sarah, Dr. Sarah, not only for inviting me, but a thank you to you and a congratulation to you and a commendation and a support to you for the work that you do as an NGO guiding force in this great country. I wish to emphasize through these words that the greatest natural resource of a country is its civil society. What carried my country through its transition from its bloody past to a democratic presence and aspiration was the strength of the civil society that had been built up over many, many years. Without it, we would not have got over that bridge whatsoever. To you, to the organizations that have presented today's proceedings, once again, let me repeat my thanks. I may also say that I had anticipated this morning with considerable apprehension. Having heard the previous speaker, I'm even more apprehensive because that is one of the toughest acts to follow in the case of a public address that I have encountered. Nevertheless, let's give it what we can. I appreciate that I'm a guest in your country, an old white foreigner with no official status, no formal right of audience in your fair land. I also appreciate that the members of the South African High Commission are here to see to it that I stick to the rules of the Queensberry Rules of Public Address. Yes. And I know that good manners and common sense dictate that I guard my tongue as a guest in a country of which I know much less than any other speaker here today. But I want to emphasize that I was not summoned from the distant south to exchange today amiable platitudes with you. I am to speak my mind. I am to speak my mind, frankly sharing my insight and experience with you. In any event, as a citizen of a kindred country, I have a legitimate interest in your well-being. We peoples of sub-Saharan Africa are all, to some extent, kindred. The clash of arms in Goma is heard in the hills of KwaZulu and in the streets of Soweto. My country still mourns the death of our 14 young SADC peacekeepers who died in January in a battle not of their making. In a world beset by umpteen conflicts, cross-currents and strife, we, your country and mine, share a common destiny. And as a lifelong human rights proponent and constitutional law devotee, I, moreover, have a particular interest in our topic today. Your and my countries have more in common than one would think. We are fellow members of the Commonwealth, both former British colonies, that relatively recently undertook radical change. The Ugandan and South African democratic constitutions were adopted almost contemporaneously, ours the February, far after yours in November, each with a striking preamble proclaiming a message of hope against the backdrop of tyranny and exploitation. Each contains an extensive array of inalienable and fully justiciable human rights. Each provides for a separation and material devolution of power, and each breathes the aspirational spirit foreshadowed in its preamble. In many respects, the two documents mirror one another. I understand my country's constitution and have first-hand knowledge of its judicial interpretation. And I had a ringside seat of its performance in the hands of our political class over the last 30 years. I have moreover worked in many and diverse emergent democracies around the world and know whereof I speak when it comes to constitutions and their functioning. I emphasize and their functioning. The most important lesson that I've learnt is that political philosophy, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu, with all their wisdom, will avail you naught in the harsh reality of practice unless you remember that laws do not change people. People change laws. Laws, any laws, including lofty constitutions, in themselves do nothing, achieve nothing, indeed are nothing but words. Constitutions do not make societies work. Societies make their constitutions work, or not work. It is the hearts, minds of the people that give life to their constitution, not the letter, not the word, not the principle, but the will of the people concerned. In that context, it's a well to remember that skillful constitutional drafting, carefully constructed checks and balances, exercise of political power, checks and balances, wise caveats and procedures might guide and constrain the exercise of political power, but ultimately the quality and the very fate of a constitution depends wholly on the society concerned. A constitution is effective only when and to the extent that it is implemented by human beings. Thus, for example, democratic constitutions seek to cement the separation of powers by making special provision to ensure the quality and independence of the judiciary. In terms of the revered US Constitution, the President nominates and the Senate approves, advises and consents, to use their language, lifelong federal judicial appointees. For more than 2 centuries, the system seemed to work well enough. Presidents came and went, judges grew old, died, and by and large, the judiciary remained substantially apolitical and universally respected as independent. But then latterly, as relations between the 2 predominant parties in the United States turned toxic, cynical political maneuvering blocked a president from exercising this influence. The result, or at least being objectively perceived to be politically partial. Short-term political gain did long-term damage to a vital institution and skewed the separation of powers principle. It also impaired the reputation of a once revered institution. In the result, a rampant Trump administration dismantles institutions, savages human rights, while the Supreme Court's majority seems complacent, or even worse, complicit. The birthright of babies born in America, the due process rights of immigrants, or those suspected of being such by reason of their pigmentation, are spurned. Infinitely more disturbing for constitutional integrity and human rights is the Trump administration's insidious and increasing attempts to cooperate the military in politics and governance. It has already had a number of alarming consequences. We have seen, and today I believed it from the news, there's yet another example of the federalization of the National Guard, which traditionally and constitutionally consists of separate bodies in each of the 50 states of the United States. It's not a federal institution. It's there at the behest of the governor. In times of war, yes, the president can summon the National Guard. There's no war in the United States, and yet the president, in breach of the Constitution, is sending troops into major cities of the country, major cities that are identified by one feature and one feature alone, and that is that they are governed by the opposition Democratic Party. This is a naked abuse of military power and quasi-constitutional authority to impose intimidatory, uniformed men and women loose on societies that are politically opposed to the government. An even more alarming feature was the summoning of the military heads from around the globe to be addressed for more than an hour by a president who did not speak military, did not speak security, did not speak international security interests, did not speak of any national interest, but spoke party politics to the heads of the military. The involvement of the armed forces in the political process is a direct and extremely dangerous innovation of the Trump regime. And the Lord alone knows for how long upcoming generations are going to be living with the consequences of this unforgivable departure from the propriety of constitutional governance. And it was done notwithstanding the rules of the Constitution, notwithstanding the existence of Congress as a restraining force, notwithstanding the authority of the opposition. Am I not sufficiently audible? I'm sorry. No, I'm happy without water. Thank you. I prefer something stronger myself. My apologies. I should have checked that I'm audible. The point I'm trying to make there is that what President Trump has done has been done notwithstanding the oldest and most admired democratic constitution in the world. And if it can be done there, what is the lesson to the rest of us? To us little rats and mice who try to follow the great democratic constitution and the great United States. But let's come a little bit closer to home. A more directly relevant example of the fallibility, not necessarily the failure, but the defective performance of constitutional provision. I don't think we need go any further than the South African Judicial Service Commission. I think it's very much similar to yours, that it changes differences of detail, but essentially the idea was that in the appointment of judges, you have an eclectic, multidisciplinary body representing the executive, the legislature, the legal profession, the teachers of law, and some ordinary citizens in a body to hire and fire judges, thus ensuring that there is some control, some quality control in their appointment, and also some quality control in their disciplining and, if necessary, dismissal. It was hailed as a brilliant idea. Constitutional drafters were enthusiastic at the time and emulated the idea. Betty and I, for instance, encountered in the Maldives where they were wildly enthusiastic about this idea of a judicial service commission in the appointment, the hiring and firing of judges. Notwithstanding the brilliance of the idea, the Judicial Service Commission in my country and in the Maldives has proved a dismal failure. Whatever the cause, whether it's lack of leadership, lack of vision, poisonous party politics, feckless administration, the JSC has faltered in both its hiring and its firing functions. Screening interviews were bungled, unsuitable candidates slipped through, good ones were turned down, bad ones were promoted, hostile and patently partial questioning of candidates reached such a level that eminently suitable private practitioners refused to let their names go forward for possible selection. They shied from the public humiliation that had been inflicted upon eminent lawyers by politicians and others for personal interest. At the same time, disciplinary proceedings proved desultory and ineffectual. And in the result, the quality and standing of the judiciary have been seriously impaired in my land, and more pertinently to our discussion here, once again it is plain that however good a constitutional tool seems on paper, it is only as good as those who use it. I've mentioned what went wrong in my country. In the Maldives, it was even worse. It became a political playground in which politicians were using the Judicial Service Commission as a threat to emphasize majority interests and minority protests in the national legislature. An institution that seemed to be aimed, beautifully, skillfully designed for judicial preservation of power and quality, served to impair the functioning of the legislature. So, I repeat, what is good on paper can turn out to be downright harmful when handled by people of ill will. But that is not to say that constitutionality, justice and the rule of law are empty notions. Far from it. They are glorious principles that set out aspirational norms and have great moral suasion. And although buttressed constitutional safeguards can be circumvented, they do serve to caution against ill-considered change. But ultimately, their survival and impact are dependent on the whims and wishes of those entrusted with their implementation. While a constitution can certainly make provision for all manner of things, unless such provisions are actually enforced in practice, they are writ in water. Shakespeare's Cassius would say, "'Tis not in our laws, but in ourselves that we are underlings." We must therefore ultimately look to the political context if we wish to promote the lofty ideals articulated in our topic. What do we know about that reality? I mean, we are talking today. I have been interested in the Great Lakes region of Africa for many years. Besides leading an electoral autopsy in Kenya some time ago, over the years I have worked in both Sudan's and the DRC. More importantly, I took a searching look at the Ugandan political legal scene when I headed an inquiry for the International Bar Association some years ago. I may say it was a surprisingly pleasant recommitment meeting the country again the day before yesterday when we arrived. The progress is startling. The atmosphere in the land is optimistic and positive. The streets are good. The highway is the envy of a South African, I may tell you. The country is doing well. I was glad to see that. But some of you may recall when criminal proceedings involving a prominent political figure precipitated overt threats of physical violence to the judiciary, and a militant and ostensibly organized gang of men, quasi-militarily uniformed in black, invaded the court. The French have a saying that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Well, that self-same person is once again, or is it still, involved by the self-same government in much the self-same manner. Now this tells us two things. The good news is that in most African countries in which I have worked, a political opponent of such influence that was so in such disfavor of the regime would not have been around 20 years later when I came back. Dr. Bisje would not have survived in many jurisdictions. Whatever would have happened to him he wouldn't have been around to make public noises. The bad news, unfortunately, is that somehow the political process has not learnt any lessons. It is inherently unacceptable for politics to be conducted in the courts of the land. It is even more unacceptable for that treatment then to be accompanied by the threat of military involvement in the process. So yes, some rules have been obeyed, opposition has been tolerated, but on the other hand, how to accommodate it has not been learnt yet, and how to keep armed forces out of processes in which they have no legitimate place has not been learnt. I pause to make perfectly plain, and I emphasize perfectly plain, I would not dare to comment on the merits of the prosecution of the doctor at the moment. My comments are directed solely at the executive action involved in that process. The legislative, the judicial conduct is none of my business, and I do not express any opinion. But last November, the doctor was reportedly apprehended summarily under colour of authority in Nairobi and conveyed to Uganda secretly, forcefully, where he was held captive in a military establishment. He has remained in custody since, and the inference that he was abducted by or on behalf of agents of the state of Uganda is all but irresistible. The inference is cogently corroborated by the circumstance that the state has vigorously maintained and defended this detention. Indeed, this time round, not only the Ugandan government and its security agencies are in the spotlight, but also those of a neighbouring country, which too cannot afford to have reports of governmental breaches of the rule of law bandied in the media. As so often happens when faults are allowed to fester, their malign influence balloons. The Besigye case is worse than it was 17 years ago. More recently, another political leader had occasion to publish a detailed account of his extra-legal detention upon his landing at Entebbe Airport and his prolonged solitary confinement and subsequent expulsion. He was put on a plane to Johannesburg by what he describes as rogue state security agents. And then last week, the BBC published a circumstantial report of security agents publicly abducting two activist supporters of yet another presidential aspirant who had not been seen since. The report speaks of, I quote, yet another alarming case in a pattern of abductions and enforced disappearances, unquote, in the region. Hear me clearly. It matters not whether the perpetrators of these abductions were indeed executing official instructions or were merely acting on their own initiative. The very existence of this course of conduct is stark evidence that there is something amiss. It cannot and should not happen in a democracy. Ostensibly politically motivated kidnappings also demonstrate that there are long-standing, unresolved political tensions that are already adding heat to the country's pre-electoral debate. Whether or not the president is re-elected, a material issue is the political class's handling after this president has gone, if he is re-elected or if he is not re-elected. How does the political class deal with the incursion of military force into the political arena? That is, I submit to you with all the seriousness of my command, a most urgent issue that has to be addressed, preferably now before it becomes critical. The point I'm trying to emphasize is that this use of public force by organized and anonymous groups is not merely an unlawful invasion of the constitutionally guaranteed rights of the victims, but, much more importantly, it constitutes a grave assault on the rule of law, and it consequently constitutes an assault on the stability of the democracy of this fair land. It is an attack on the legitimacy, the stability, and the survival of the state itself. To indulge, condone, or encourage it is folly in the extreme. The state is the ultimate exemplar of lawful obedience. Where it breaks the law, chaos looms large. Kenya is a telling example of what happens when a messianic leader leaves the scene. The Kenyatta regime was a relatively stable one because there was the great leader, the Mzee, at the head of the state, who by moral and personal suasion could keep things together. The Arab Moi regime willy-nilly had to resort, after it took over, within a couple of years, to forces of compulsion and military invasion, security force, work in the shadows, in order to keep together what the leader's personal charisma had managed to cement. It is not an example that you should ignore. It is not an example only from a neighboring country. It has its echoes in several post-colonial young democracies. Once the leader goes, the centrifugal forces either succeed or have to be maintained by retention forces inconsistent with a democratic regime. I repeat, it should be addressed seriously now, not later. The need for the government of Uganda to be exemplary is not merely of domestic importance. The region as a whole is politically unstable, and badly in need of steadfast adherence to the rule of law. To the north, Vice President Riek Machar of South Sudan is on trial for treason. To the south, it's the opposition party leader Tundu Lissu who is on trial for treason. To the west, former President Joseph Kabila has just been convicted of treason and has been sentenced to death in absentia. To the southwest, the rebel Congo River Alliance repudiates the legitimacy of the DRC government and rejects the peace accord that President Trump so grandiloquently claims to have settled. overall picture of the region is of a sunny, healthy, fruitful Uganda surrounded by countries infinitely less favoured by fate. You have had stability for many years through means with which not everybody necessarily agrees, but the fact of the matter, the historical fact is that today this country is doing well. It is ostensibly stable, but there are these undercurrents symptomatic of a fever that will certainly erupt in due course unless it is addressed now. My concluding message to you this morning is that Uganda, the people, the political role players, and specifically the government of this Pearl of Africa, have a vital interest in fulfilling its destiny as a beacon of stable and genuine democracy in the region. Its upcoming general election, the 7th under the same political leadership, simply has to be manifestly free, fair, even-handed, and legitimate. I repeat what I said before. Uniforms have no business in the courts. And I add, uniforms have even less business in the polling stations. The electoral process is a civilian process of free and fair voters, unpersuaded, unintimidated by men in a uniform. Democracy, justice, and the rule of law demands of the government and the people of Uganda that they fulfill their destiny. Thank you.
Let's give him a standing ovation, another one, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Your Lordship, for this moving keynote. I think whatever he says is something that really speaks to our context, not just here in Uganda, but across the Great Lakes. We do appreciate you for sharing your candid thoughts in your keynote. Thank you very much. I also hope I have matched your my expectations of you were actually correct, Justice. You did justice to what I had read about you. Thank you very much. It's time for us to now move to the next session on our program, which is the speakers session. And allow me to also recognize a few faces that have joined us. Dr. Miriam Atembe, who is one of our speakers. Thank you very much for joining us here in this room. I also have other names from the National Planning Authority. We have Ms. Rosette Kuhurwa, you're most welcome. Nakumitsa Sarah, Uganda Human Rights Commission, Director Regional Human Rights. Thank you very much. I'll also continue with the acknowledgements a little later. So very quickly, we move to our next session, and I will invite our first speaker to the podium, Professor Frederick Sempebwa. If you could come over here, if you just come and take your seat, so that we kickstart this session. Of course, you know Professor Sempebwa as a highly influential figure in relation to constitutionalism in Uganda. He's played several key roles and actions, you can just come over and take your seat. I would also invite Justice Emeritus, Your Lordship James Ogola. You could also come over here to the podium. Justice Ogola is the former principal judge. But, I mean, they have very, very big profiles that I could take the whole day reading about. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Dr. Miriam Atembe, I would also invite you to the podium. If you check the program, you'll notice that we did not give them topics specifically. We did not want to box them into a corner. We wanted to have as candid a conversation here as possible, and so we did not want to restrict them in any way. And from this point forth, I think I'll hand over to my colleague, Kanari Mugume, to actually take us through this session. So you'll have 30 minutes each to speak about the issue of constitutionalism and the guardians who should take charge of guarding this constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Judith. I think at this point, we'll begin with Professor Frederick Sempewa, and we'll go in that order.
It is red. Well, thank you very much, Sarah, for inviting me. Normally, I'm used to being given a topic to speak about so that I can prepare. And this is quite a strange change for me, that I don't have a topic. I'm at large. But I would like, first of all, to thank you for inviting our keynote speaker. He's a person of great experience. I thought I was old, but when I Googled about him, I found that he became an advocate in 1959. I think I'm right. I hope I'm right. I hope that is not AI information. And in 1959, where was I? I was in Senior 1. Yes, I was in Senior 1. And of course, most of our participants, if I asked them where they were, they probably will not have an answer. I got to know more about him when I was appointed on the committee of experts that drafted the final version of the Constitution of Kenya. Of the background readings we had, there were two reports, the Kriegler report and the Wachi report. The Kriegler report was mostly on the electoral system in Kenya. This was after the electoral violence of 2007. And one of the key factors that contributed to that violence was the flaw in the elections. If you had an opportunity to glance at that report, there will be interesting comparisons with what is going on currently in Uganda and what he has spoken about. So his has been a very great contribution, especially at this point in our constitutional development, as we have yet another election. Now, he has said that constitution do not change people. It is people who change the constitutions. How correct in the case of Uganda? I think you will agree that this has been one of our problems, that it's our mindset, it's our will that would apply or implement the Constitution rather than simply change it. It's good that we have a young generation here. And I would like to repeat what I always say, that what we gained a lot from making the Constitution of Uganda was not to produce a document. It is the conversation that we had for all that period between the making of the Constitutional Commission and the promulgation of the Constitution. Here was an opportunity for everyone to speak freely, to make proposals, to discuss. And it was a very sensitizing exercise. After years of turmoil, after years of not knowing about our rights, we had this opportunity for that period under the Odochi Commission, under which I served, and my friend Miria served. On that commission, we never entirely agreed with her, but we eventually had a consensus on many issues, just as Ugandans had a consensus. So that was very, very good. What has happened subsequently, of course, we have gone into divisions. Now when we discuss from a view of the division that we belong to. Now, to react to some of the points that have been made this morning, and I will try and relate it, if I have time, to the speech of our keynote address. It's been said that one of the gains we had from the Constitution is relative stability. It depends on what you mean by stability. If I'm at home, I'm the husband, I have a wife, I have children, I can tell them, look, no one should ever say anything in this house unless it is in my praise. And when I come back, you keep quiet. It's me to make orders. I create stability in my home, isn't it? It's peaceful, no one speaks. As soon as I land, things go smoothly. Well, if that is the sort of stability, yes, we have gained a bit of stability. That's a gain that has been scored this morning. However, we have to look critically on that sort of stability, and I'm glad that our keynote speaker has had a comparison with Kenya under Mzee Kenyatta and under Arap Moi, where under Mzee Kenyatta, by virtue of having gone through his suffering and come to power, there was a relative legitimacy in the regime under him. And afterwards, Arap Moi had to struggle with a crisis of legitimacy. And as a result, he had to employ all sorts of means, including force. And when he left, there was utter chaos. So I think we have to keep this in mind and be very careful when we talk about relative stability. Just reminds me of the saying in my community long time back, tweva kakutulo, at least we sleep. But stability is not about sleeping. Going back to our constitution, it's been said that this morning our guest of honor talked about also stability and also wondered what we mean by balancing of power, which is one of our cardinal principles in the Constitution. It's a democratic principle. He has invited me to have tea with him, and I accept the invitation. Then we can talk about this. Our guest speaker, our keynote speaker has mentioned the situation in America now and compared it to the constitutional principle of checks and balances, where the president acts and the Congress checks. Now, you cannot say that because a president has been going around seeking votes and so on, it should remain unchallenged. Even members of parliament go around seeking for votes if that was the criteria. So this is a principle that has broken down in this country over the years, and I would not agree with our guest speaker that Parliament has done a wonderful job in accordance with the Constitution, because they are meant to provide checks and balances. They are meant to look critically at the acts of the executive. But what has happened? I don't think I need to elaborate, because this has been discussed and rediscussed by many of you seniors who are here in the civil society. Maybe for our young generation, you read about the principle, but you should be aware of how it is put in practice. And the way Parliament is acting now, of course, is on a sectarian basis. It's simply that if the proposal is coming from the President, we members of the ruling party must agree to it at whatever cost. There's a lot that we can talk about gains, but much more about drawbacks or failures. My favorite that has been mentioned again this morning is about decentralization, which is popularly known as devolution. When we proposed the idea of decentralization, there were two or three objectives. Of course, one was to take democracy closer to the people. The second was dispersal of powers so that power is not concentrated in the center. But the main one was another layer of checks and balances. But this is only possible where the devolved units, the local government units, are strong. They have all the capacities, including financial capacities, to stand, and they can provide a challenge to the center. We had, at the initiation of the Constitution, 35 local government units, around 35 or 36, something like that. And these were conceived as relatively sufficient for us to be able to play the role. Now, how many local governments do we have? Maybe God knows best. 100? 146. And recently, the president has awarded new districts. But I saw him on TV last night complaining about the cost of districts. He had just said we need more districts. And last night he said, oh, it's so expensive. We have too many districts. So this is not decentralization. It is a recentralization. And we have failed. But we had failed. When I was in Kenya and we were discussing the Constitution, my role was to warn them about our failures. And they were wise. They avoided them. They are very happy about their devolution. There are 47 counties. And they are headed by governors. You know those governors, there's no need anymore to rush to the center to stand for parliament or what. You can stay in the counties, in your county, compete for governor, for other office on the governor's cabinet, and so on and so on. So the power has been dispersed. But for us, we moved backwards. This is something that we have to rethink. There are so many other matters that I don't need to talk about, but this is one that most people have not talked about. It has more complications because now the cost of administration, if we had been allowed to ask questions to the Deputy Speaker, I would have said, look, in your deliberations, do you actually challenge these developments on account of costs, on account of what we can afford, the cost of administration, maintaining 140, now they are going to be about 150. And you know what happens when each district is established. There must be counties in that district, so there are more MPs. There must be a woman MP for the district. And there must be a government of the district. All this is expensive. But Parliament simply approves because the President has said so. This is what the Speaker was saying, the balancing of powers. You don't have to question the President because he has been hunting votes. He said that he doesn't understand about this, how you can balance. Yes. I'll not take long because I know this is going to be a discussion, but I cannot go away without commenting on more on the speech by our keynote speaker. Very important to note what he has said, that we cannot play politics in courts. I hope you have noted that. We should keep the armed forces out of politics. Sir, you spoke as if you've been living in Uganda. Because this is exactly what we are doing. If you looked at our elections today and you reread your report on the Kenya elections, you'll be shocked. Because he is what is going on, and personally for me, I don't know why people are campaigning for president. They believe they can also become president in this country. What a facade, what a play, because this is a stage play. If you can go to campaign and the armed forces are ready to divert you, to prevent you from campaigning, and you keep on campaigning, and you think you will become a president. But let me stop there for a moment.
Thank you very much, Professor Frederick Sepewa. And now I'll let the Honourable Justice James Ogola to speak next.
Thank you. I was wondering why I was invited to speak here. And now I know why. To my right and to my left, including myself, were guests a couple of weeks ago at State House, where we were awarded some honor for motivating people?
Example of good leadership in public and mentoring young generation.
Mentoring young generation. That's why Sarah, I think, saw the clip and called three of us here. I don't know about Justice Grigler. Were you awarded anything in the last couple of weeks? Two of these three, I'm the only one who is not an insider. These two colleagues of mine were part and parcel of the Constituent Assembly or the Review Commission.
He was the first one, then the review. So he chaired that.
When Dr. Masembe is finished, I will continue with my speech.
You were wondering.
But what claim do I have to knowing anything at all about constitutions, especially constitution making and safeguarding it? I happen to be a member of the judiciary at one time and dealt very closely with the interpretation, application of constitutions. Today, at this conference, we commemorate and we celebrate 30 odd years of the promulgation of our Constitution. Yet yesterday, 9th October, we celebrated 63 years of our country's sovereign independence from the clutches of 70 years of foreign rule. Our deep gratitude goes to our hosts, CG, for undertaking today's noble celebrations of our Constitution. The big question in my mind to ask is this: how come there is a discrepancy, a disconnect between the birthday of our country and the birthday of her Constitution? Was the country born without a Constitution? If there was a Constitution at the genesis of the country, what happened to that Constitution? Where did it go? What circumstances gave rise to its disappearance? But more importantly, what lessons do we glean from the somber history of Uganda's 63 years of sovereignty? Sovereignty sometimes with a constitution, and sovereignty sometimes without a constitution. We shall attempt to answer those questions later in my presentation. For now, let us explore other facets of the constitutional history of the Independent Republic of Uganda. There is a gap of 33 years between the birth of Uganda in 1962 and the birth of the Constitution in 1995. In that 33-year gap lies the seed and the DNA of the hiccups, false starts, reverberations, insurrections, assassinations, and revolutions of Uganda's constitution and institutional dispensation. In a sense, of course, all these are but the storms and strifes of nation building. Let us now focus on the 30 years of the existence of the 1995 Constitution. The theme of my focus will be along the lines of constitutional accountability or an audit of the balance sheet of the Constitution of 1995. Here we will attempt to delve into an accountability or auditing, or post-mortem, if you will, of the 1995 Constitution. It's an audit of the performance of the Constitution, made with reference to each and every relevant sector of the state. In this regard, the Constitution itself provides for safeguards against abuse. The sectors on which the duty to safeguard the integrity and vitality of the Constitution are many, but chief among them are the following four. 1, the judicial branch. 2, the legislative branch. 3, the executive branch. And 4, we, the people, the citizens of this pearl of Africa. A pearl, I must add, which was once luminous, now rustic and jaded. How have these four branches fared in upholding the integrity, the vitality, and the sanctity of the Constitution over these 30 years? Let's take each branch one by one, very much on the lines of the biblical parable of the talents. One investor was given 10, another I think 5, the last one 1. And there came time for accountability on how they invested their talents. The judiciary, by its unique mandate of calling to order all the other sectors and branches of state, is the branch on which the life of the constitutional safeguards rests. It's the one branch that is vested with the obligation and the power to interpret and to apply provisions of the Constitution, and to sanction those who would contravene or violate the content and the intent of the Constitution. To stand true to its mandate, the judiciary needs to manifest courage, boldness, and clarity in pronouncing itself over the constitutional cases and petitions that come to it for the judicial resolution. Justice Kreigler, when he started his presentation, said that he was going to speak his mind. The judiciary, especially, needs to speak their mind in judicial resolution of disputes. What has the judiciary of Uganda demonstrated in these matters over the 30 years of existence of the 1995 Constitution? The court's performance has been a mixed bag. Let's consider just 3 of the many groundbreaking cases the court has dealt with. 1, in a presidential election petition, I believe of 2006, I could be wrong, but I believe it's 2006, the court took an ambiguous stand. It held that in that particular presidential election, all the rules of a fair and credible election were contravened, I believe, by the winner, quote, winner. But that nonetheless, that winner would take victory legitimately. Here, the court was perceived by many to have failed in its duty to stand for the courage of its conviction. Also perceived to lack clarity in its stand on such an important matter. The court left ambiguity floating in the air and a fog drifting in the mind of the citizenry. When a similar, almost identical petition came up in the neighboring Republic of Kenya, the court there took courage and clarity to overturn the results of the presidential election in no uncertain terms. In a second case, before the court, the Constitutional Court of Uganda was loud and clear and emphatically ruled that the President's power over judicial appointments was restricted to the candidates duly vetted and recommended to the President by the Judicial Service Commission. The President could accept or reject them, but could not substitute his own or her own preferred candidates, let alone to suggest to the Judicial Service Commission which candidates to consider or to interview. And in any case, the President's appointment of judicial officers was and is subject to further vetting, and that is by the legislature. This year, 2025, the top court was faced with another case of gigantic constitutional importance, namely whether military courts in Uganda have jurisdiction to try civilians. This time, the court minced no words. It quickly, courageously, and succinctly ruled against military jurisdiction over civilians and compelled the state to immediately discontinue any such cases that were ongoing and turn them over to the appropriate civilian courts. Second audit is about the legislative branch. Here we explore the legislative branch's mandate to pass the laws of the land. Its mandate is to pass laws that are consistent with the letter and the spirit of the Constitution. How many times and how deeply have legislative enactments been struck down for non-conformity with the Constitution? How often have members of Parliament, singly and collectively, bent over backwards to desecrate the very foundations of the constitutional edifice of the nation? In this regard, two prime examples come to mind. The representatives of the people found no qualms at all to strike down a hallowed provision of the Constitution, which mandated term limits on the President's occupation of that office. In equal measure, they found it easily conscientious to strike down an equally hallowed provision of the Constitution that prescribed age limits on the President's occupation of that office. Increasingly, the legislative branch has tended to ingratiate itself too closely with the executive branch. To the extent of fundamental decisions within the ambit of the legislature, including clear constitutional matters, being taken in caucuses held at State House, if not at the ruling party's ideological college, Kyankwanzi. Such decisions are then brought to the official legislative house for endorsement, usually without any deep-seated, soul-searching debate and deliberation, but quite often with well-oiled, open funding of the legislators by the executive. Worse still, consider the position of the Speaker of the Legislative Chamber, who occupies the third highest ranking office of the ruling party's policy organ. I believe it's called the National Executive Council, NEC. A position over which toxic, open, partisan campaigning was exorbitantly exhibited recently. All these have stood in stark contradiction of the country's constitutional doctrine of separation of powers. All in all, 30 years of the existence of the Constitution have seen a disturbing correlation between the legislative and the executive branches of state, which negates the healthy constitutional mandate of clear-cut separation of the three major arms of state. In these scenarios, the end loser is the integrity, the vitality, and the sanctity of our cherished Constitution. Audit number 3, the executive branch over these 30 years of the Constitution. Constitutional mandate of the executive branch is to execute the laws and the affairs of the state, and to do so with the total faith and fidelity to the dictates of the Constitution. It is for this reason that the President, all cabinet members, and all top civil servants of the state mandatorily take an oath to, quote, defend, protect, and uphold the Constitution. And at the end of that, they expressly invoke divine help. They say, so help me God, or words to that effect. With that invocation, the sanctity and the sacredness of the Constitution is sealed. Of all the branches of the state, the executive is the one endowed with the power, authority, and the means to enforce the country's constitutional mandate. How often has the executive disobeyed, I put that word in quotes, disobeyed the orders of the courts, the stands of the legislature, and trampled underfoot the open wishes of the people? A very recent case in point is the latest major judgment of the top court concerning the lack of jurisdiction by military courts to try civilians. The executive has exhibited disdain, indeed contempt, for the court's clear ruling and orders in this matter. Furthermore, there was a time when the executive, sometime back when I was still on the bench, the executive not only disdained court rulings in land disputes, but did install its own mechanisms at State House to sort of review particular court rulings and orders in land matters, and to substitute their own rulings in such matters. How often has the executive run roughshod over the content and the intent of the Constitution? The last audit, we, the people. The 1995 Court Constitution went a step further to impose on the citizens a duty to ensure that all persons under the Constitution live by it. And if there are contraventions and violations of it, that we, the people, intervene to put right the matter. How have we, the people, lived up to and measured up to our constitutionally given privilege and duty? Have we done so faithfully and consistently? Have we gone to the courts to enforce this? Have we poured out in the streets in peaceful protest to show our outrage when things go wrong? Have we petitioned Parliament over any such shortcomings? Have we elected wise, courageous, and conscientious representatives and civic leaders to voice our lamentations and grievances in the allotted councils of state? In short, have we sought to uphold the Constitution, to protect it, to defend it when occasion has demanded our undivided attention and participation? And we, the people, participate in all these as individuals and corporately, as political party leaders and members, trade, industrial and labor unionists, members of civic organizations, as youth in society, as elders in the communities, as members of the Fourth Estate, and above all, as enfranchised electors in the nation. Summary: all in all, the diverse branches of state have played a critical role in the development and management of the constitutional mandate over the last 30 years. There have been bright spots shown in the constitutional firmament, but there have also been a thick darkness covering the letter and the spirit of the Constitution, as well as the content and the intent of its mandate. It's been a mixed bag of performance on all fronts. The future wellness and welfare of the Constitution in the next 30 years would demand a lot more from all fronts to ensure that the rights, the freedoms, and the liberty contained in the Constitution, as well as the duties and responsibilities conferred by the Constitution, are upheld, protected, defended, and safeguarded in our land. Foremost among the principles that we need to cultivate and adhere to will be the principle of constitutionalism, the ethic of absorbing in the very fiber of the state the ideal to live by the constitutional construct in every breath that we inhale and in every breath that we exhale. And that brings us back to where we started. Where was the Constitution during the 33-year gap of our sovereign life? Suffice to say, there was an interregnum, I believe that's the word, when there's no monarch on the throne or something like that. There was an interregnum of sorts. In 1961-62, Uganda had the British-designed independence constitution, which sought to marry monarchism and republicanism in one national love bed. In 1966, hardly 4 years of our independence, following on the storming of the Kabaka's palace, or Lubiri, at Mengo, the Independence Constitution was unceremoniously thrown out, and a brand new one that no one had ever heard of except the then Prime Minister and his Attorney General was stuck in the legislators' pigeonholes. Then hardly 1 year later, in 1967, the pigeonhole constitution was yanked out and a Republican one brought in. Hardly 4 years after that, on 25th January 1971, the government was forcefully thrown out, and with it, the nation's constitution was by a stroke of Idi Amin's pen abolished in the coup d'etat of that month and year. From 1971 to 1995, Uganda writhed under one decree or another, totally without a promulgated constitution. A state without a constitution is next to a stateless entity. A state without legal boundaries. A state without state organs. A state without the rule of law. Instead, a state ruled by capricious decrees of the imposed ruler. A state without the safeguards of a constitution, a state where anything and everything groans under the caprice of the prince. Little wonder then that Idi Amin, the archetypical prince of caprice, got away with a string of murders, assassinations, genocide, and a litany of untold atrocities, including the infamous mass expulsion of Ugandan citizens of Asian extraction without any constitutional qualms from any corner. Close on Idi Amin's heels and the military boots of the Tanzanian Wakombozi, there followed other warlords who ascended to the throne by force of arms, namely the Mwangas, men of iron, the Tito and Basilio Okello, twin generals, and then, 1985, the Bush warriors from the blood-stained Luwero Triangle. During all this time, the Constitution stood overthrown. Without overthrow, the age of the Constitution vanished. Instead, the age of the rifle was ushered into the national fabric to last from 1971 to 1995. Period of, I believe, 24 years. The sanctity of the Constitution was seriously raped, woefully deflowered, then thrown out of the narrow window as the rifle and the military boots marched in through the big gate of the hapless state. What are the lessons to learn? And I will be done. 1, let us obey the Constitution. 2, let us adhere to it like a leech on the body skin. 3, let us worship the Constitution as the foundation of the citizens' freedom, equality, fraternity, and liberty. 4, let us desist from tampering with the letter and the spirit of the Constitution. 5, let the judicial branch do the interpretation and application of the Constitution totally unfettered by any other branch of state. To tamper with the content and intent of the Constitution risks sliding into total abrogation or repudiation of the rest of the Constitution. In this regard, let's avoid George Orwell's Animal Farm syndrome, where the liberators gradually transform into the original oppressors. Seven, let us all, everyone, however lofty a position they may occupy in the hierarchy of society, let us all uphold the gospel of the Constitution. Number 8, the last one. Let us, from deep down in our national fiber, live by the spirit and ethic of constitutionalism. I am done.
Another round of applause. I think the message is clear. Let's just avoid tampering with the Constitution. I would like now to invite Dr. Miriam Matembe to speak next.
I don't know now what. When these distinguished seniors of mine have said it all. But I want to thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this discussion. I want to thank our guest speaker. I must apologize for arriving late and missing some of the things, but at least I had the crucial ones. The one which you said, stability. And another one which I will say. I must say that I'm so happy and privileged to sit here with these seniors, you know. When 59, Where was I? But at least I was there more than many of you. I was somewhere. And the joy I get is that when I find myself on a platform with my, especially this, you are the seniorist because the gray hair looks more than these distinguished people whom I highly respect. You know why I love my God? God is very amazing. You know, let me first say that since I have no topic, I'm here to speak from my mind. As my God drops the words, I will say them. And so, what was good? I was going to say that God is amazing. Because can you imagine, I respect these people so highly, and all of you do so. First of all, I am a lawyer through Professor there. He was my best lecturer in Makerere. And I used to admire and do his subjects so well. Can you imagine, God is so gracious, only to find myself sitting with this great man, being a member of the Uganda Constitutional Commission. Can you imagine? And moreover, just Sodochi, who was a great at the RODC. These great people, God put me to sit with them. And we make a constitution. You remember she was saying that they were not agreeable to so many of my things because I was, young, and for them they had seen the experience in this country, and me, I was so vibrant, with the NRIM, and I was saying the beginning of Uganda, the new one, which will be great. So at times I would come with that vibe, but then they would say this one. But in the end, consensus. Why I'm saying that is, you see, you have heard their views. I'll put mine. The good thing is that I sit with, they have humor in a diplomatic way. For me, I just, no diplomacy. So I will undiplomize. Does that word exist? They are diplomatic. I will what they are saying so that, they are very bright. You can see them. Now, he started by saying, you even forgot, talk about the rape of the Temple of Justice. Why did you forget that? That was one of the things that were happening, destroying our constitution. And this brave judge there, when the court was headed by the military to, you remember, some of you were not there yet. And he stood up and said, we had to go there, the lawyers, and wash the Temple of Justice because it was raped. Things began long ago. But now, when you told these people that the other day we found ourselves there unknowing that the country of Uganda, not the government, it was the country Uganda, which was recognizing us as the great people, great leaders of integrity, and, working as example, as leaders to this country and mentors of the young generation. Can you imagine? What does that mean? That if, despite our open talks, the people of this country know that, yes, we are great leaders in this country. You clap for us. And then after that, when actually TikTok was saying, now Matembe is finished his boat, then Sarah said, now I'm going to redeem you by bringing you here on this platform so that you still keep your mind. So I'm very grateful to that. One thing I say I am favored. I don't know whether any of you have been privileged enough to be right from the beginning of this 1995 Constitution. I was there as a commissioner. I was there as Constituent Assembly delegate. I was there on the committee, legal and drafting committee, that put a stamp to the final document that was promulgated. I didn't stop there. Then I went to Parliament to start the implementation of that constitution. Therefore, you can see the favor I have, knowing every stage. Thank you very much for giving the background, where we are coming from when we made the 1995 Constitution. And by the way, I've been telling people, when you come and say 30 years of implementing the 1995 Constitution, I said, wait a minute. The 1995 Constitution stopped before 10 years, you know? And I can prove this because the 1995 Constitution the commission was chaired by Justice Odoki. That constitution you call Odoki Commission, down the road, there was the Ssemateeka Review Commission. You forget that, you Ugandans. Before 10 years even, I think, there was the Uganda Review, the Constitutional Review Commission, chaired by Professor Ssemateeka, who was one of the members of the original commission. And what did he do? He saw all these things as he chaired, and he came out with a minority report. Thank him. You clap. You people, you know, you don't know. Because he realized, he said, no, our constitution, which was popularly made, you people, this was the first time Ugandans sat together and they said, yes, colonialism is gone. Those constitutions made by those people are gone. This is the moment, this is the time we Ugandans are sitting here to recreate our Uganda, because the other one was cut like this, and we were building a foundation on which to build the new Uganda. And move on. That were the expectations. If you look at the principles, I have noted them down, but I don't know where I put my notebook. Senior age is coming in. But the principles, Sarah, you know them in our preamble, the principles upon which the new constitution were based, and we are seeing a new Uganda. And we elected, and Ugandans talked, and this is what we want, this is where we want to go. And the CA put this, yes, this is it. And then we went very happy and held elections in 1996, you know, to put the President MUSEVENI in official power. Because the other 10 years, he had taken over government and overthrown constitutions. So he was able to make sure that we make a constitution. At the 1996 elections, the first elections within the constitution, to start implementing the constitution, and I want to thank the Lord that I was also there. And that time, election violence, no. Rigging, no. Bribe, no. All those things were not there. And so we start implementing our constitution. Before 9 years or what? This constitution is critically injured. What do you call it? When they cut your leg. Amputated. Thank you very much. That constitution, by 10 years, it was amputated by removing crucial thing that Ugandans were concerned about. But before that, as a person who started implementing the constitution, I came to realize, I told you I'm not going into diplomacy. I came to realize that leadership seemed not to have understood constitutionalism. You know, wanting a constitution. You know, in the Bible there is a statement which says that some Christians have a form of godliness, but denying its power. So now, in this country, the leadership wanted a constitution, but denying its power. And for me, I say maybe they didn't understand the power of a constitution. They thought that a constitution is a mere paper. And I personally had our president telling us, constitution is a mere paper. And that's what President Obote had also said. But a constitution is a mere paper. So if our leaders see a constitution as just a mere paper, without understanding constitutionalism, then what do you say? I'm telling you these things because we are looking at the journey of the constitution. So ours ended in 10 years. Then after that, the Constitutional Review Commission, which came now and cut the leg and facilitated or enabled disabled and disabled the constitution to work. You see, started limping. And that's when things began. But it was brought by the realization that the principle of separation of powers affects or disturbs the executive. Because it was very clear, I don't know whether any of you, Sarah, you remember that case of Bujagari. That was the beginning. When Bujagari, the executive wanted to give a contract to make electricity in Bujagari to a company in America, and now the parliament took its authority and looked at it and said, no, this is not right. We are not taking this. Sixth Parliament. You people, you always hear how Sixth Parliament is a pain in the neck of our president. The Sixth Parliament stood up like he was saying, no, we have our authority. We must take authority here. Executive, you are not going to order us here, like the NRC previously. And that was hell. Hell broke loose from that time. You people who don't know what is happening with this constitution and all that kind of thing. That, the principle of separation of powers, where the president realized that, hey, you mean I am hampered in being the Professor Sempewa, what he told us, he's the head of the household. He tells these women and children, don't talk, don't talk. So all of a sudden he sees the wife talking now. Something must happen to you. So there was now a new strategy to recapture the authority from the institutions of the state, those three institutions, the parliament, the judiciary, and me as I talk, because I don't want to take long, because they have said it all, but I said I'm diplomatizing it for you. So for me, as far as I'm concerned, down the road, the parliament, the constitution of Uganda, the parliament who was working with implementing the constitution ended with the 7th parliament. And you all know, you who were there. Because when the term limit was proposed and removed, and was to be removed, and the Ugandans were saying no, some of us were the leaders who said no. Why? Because we knew what Ugandans want. We knew what Ugandans want. We were seeing them. We saw their passion. They said, this country, you are telling us of a constitution, but we can tell you, you cannot. What does the constitution mean when the president can never hand power peacefully? Their concern was, unless we have peaceful handover of power from one president to another, then this constitution does not make sense to us. And we asked them, so what do we do? And they said, let us limit the term of the president. Because the president comes in, they have power, they have military, they have resources, we cannot talk. You know, my senior here was saying, let us raise the demonstration. Which demonstration? Where will you demonstrate from? You know, my senior, you are telling them, let us do this, but you are telling the wrong people. All these people seated here have no right to do. That is the truth. The ones who have rights to do are not here. I hope they will read those things, but even if they do. So, for me, as far as I'm concerned, the moment the term limit was removed, and was removed through corruption, who doesn't know this? When we stood up very tough, 5 million came. The parliament was bribed. They removed the term limit, and the beginning started. Right from the 8th parliament, implementation of the constitution, the principle of separation of powers, and then the judiciary was raped. So now, in other words, he was saying diplomatically, but the principle of separation of powers does not apply in this country. You all know that. You look at the executive. Who rules the executive? Don't you know? In the constitutionalism, where is the position of the first family? Is it there? Is it given role? But practically, who rules this country? Who does? Me, I came here to undiplomaticalize these things so that you see them very properly. And I'm not going to talk too much. That constitution, as I told you, when you look at the principles which it had put, unity, peace, freedom, equality, we had suffered with the military. We had suffered the way we are suffering now. Militarization. Me, I call the rulership in this country military dictatorship. Whether you talk of elections, to me, they mean nothing. This is me. You called me to talk as a person who started and saw the journey and saw where it is ending now. And I want to say that Ugandans have been captured, the institutions have been captured. For you, you are captured by fear. I don't know whether it is fear for jobs, whether fear for your lives. You just bow anyhow and you go on. So where is the constitutionalism now? Now I can look here and see what I had put. The major question of that constitution that time was governance, as you have heard. Handing of power peacefully from one president to another. It is now 40 years. No peaceful handover of power from one president to another. What independence is that? Me, I'm asking. Independence? Where Ugandans cannot decide, where the civil society, civic space is captured. Some of us are chased everywhere we go to try to do. You remember Sedu, which was looking over the elections and so on, and when I became a chair, it was closed completely so that he doesn't talk, but I continue talking because that is the talent I got. You remember when they gave talent? I've got to account for my talent when I go to heaven. And so, central, and I should finish, then we'll debate. Central to the problem of governance in this country, which leads to violation of our constitution and forgetting what? Constitutionalism is what drives people into leadership in this country, especially the political leadership. What should drive people into leadership should be people. You should be self-centered. You should be people-centered and service-oriented. You go to positions of power, to get power, to use it, to serve your people and your nation. That is the leadership I knew. That is the leadership for which we are getting these awards. That one. But the current leadership, right down the road as it moves, has been overtaken by self-centeredness and power-oriented. People want power to use it for their self-interests. So, with that kind of thing, what constitutionalism are you talking about? Central to the Constitution were human rights. Human rights was very central. You can imagine the violation of human rights in this country. High. People are suffering. Then come greed. Have you ever, the other day I was saying, but surely I think our land is cursed because greed for land, torturing, oppressing. You ended with that statement, the animal farm, where those people who came to deliver us and we embraced, they have really oppressed, exploited, manipulated, that people are crying. Our guest of honor, Chief Speaker, people are crying for you, you live in your country, but people are suffering, people are crying, the oppressed, the poor, the gap between the rich and the poor is just too much. If you are poor, no treatment. The members of parliament, the ministers, they fly them away for treatment. For you, you die there suffering. Yes, relative stability, you said, yes, they are sleeping. But are they sleeping in peace or in pain? Really? This is serious. Now, I think I have said that fear, self-centeredness, and no constitutionalism, but constitution. Some form of godliness without respecting its power. One thing that our guest speaker said, which came into my mind, the second one, not Professor, I won't quote your words, but they are there. I wish you could read them for us. But he said that something in this country is glooming. Those are my words. And unless it is halted or dealt with, we are in to see a full burst. I said, hey, kumbe the guest knows our things. Because for sure, all of you know whatever is going on, even with the elections. By the way, have you ever seen the parliament is not sitting? Why? Because the speaker is accompanying the president in the campaign. You people, where is the democracy? Where is constitutionalism? Where is it? I must finish here, and then you will challenge me, and then we shall see how we move. But let me conclude by saying this. Many people condemn us. I'm sure Professor also knows. But for him, he could have stopped that commission. But for us who went see and made the constitution, we are being accused. It is our fault. We are the people who gave the president the centralized power that he must do anything he wants. I want to tell you today, having been given this opportunity, that that's a lie. The president abuses power. We gave him the right power. We looked at Uganda, we said, the president is answerable for anything that goes wrong or right. And so since he's answerable, once a president is elected, we should give him peace, some way to nominate those people whom he thinks can work with him to lead this country. We said he should have that right to nominate. But we said, since Parliament represents us as people, and since power belongs to the people, as we said in the Constitution, and we have given this power which belongs to us, to the members of Parliament and to the President, to lead us. Now let the President, who will be answerable finally, have the authority and power to nominate the people he wants to work with. Whether cabinet, whether judges, whether what, government parastatals, let him nominate, but subject his nomination to the Parliament which represents us, so that the Parliament had the power and authority to reject or endorse. And when I was in that Parliament, which I called the Parliament, not this. Yes, we would decide. You know, when we decided, he made sure he fought us, and we got out and he captured the Parliament. But we would decide, we censured even ministers. We censured them. We would refuse to endorse an appointment. But now, even when the Parliament censures the minister, the minister stays there working. Can you imagine a minister, you censured the minister, he's supposed to go. And now he appears before you. And now he has a budget. And you give it. How do you see her? Why don't you throw her out? But does the parliament do that? It has been demeaned. It has been made powerless. It has been like you bow down to this holy person up there. And we are just done. Otherwise, the parliament is the one supposed to endorse or reject. It handed over its power. It surrendered itself. It bowed, like, I don't want to use those tough words, but I would have said it, but we have guests here. I want them to think I'm very good. You just bow your authority, and then they walk on you and you move on. You people, so stop condemning us. The man has no absolute power. He only abuses power. He violates the constitution, and then the rest say yes, 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 and it is your fault. So you better rise up and redeem yourself. And with that, I endorse all these things which my seniors said. I was only detonating it to small ones.
Interesting. This conversation is live on UBC TV. Thank you. Dr. Matembe. I'll ask our panelists to hold the seats a little bit so we can now get reactions from the plenary. I'll give whoever wants to speak, 3 minutes each. Just observe time, please. 3 minutes, and then we'll get back to, if you have any comment or question, then we'll get back to our speakers so we can conclude this conversation. Three minutes for everyone who's... Yes, thank you.
Mr. Moderator, sir, the distinguished panelists, and the keynote addresser. My name is John Ken Luchams, the man. Before I make any comment, I must say, without biasness, that the 3 stars are pronounced, should be pronounced as intellectuals. And to borrow the words of Professor Mazui, who mentored me, Professor Mazui defined an intellectual as a person who is fascinated by ideas and has acquired the skill to handle those ideas effectively. They have effectively acted. My first reaction goes to Honorable Matembe, who was my colleague in the 70s. Madame Matembe, you seem as if you had a fear for 1962 Constitution. You cannot disown the federal constitution under which the Ugandan nation was born. Whether there were squiggles here and there, you should be proud of your birth as a nation state, so that you do not hide under the blame of colonialism as an influence from the right context. My comment is about the remarks made by Professor Ssemateeka, who was a key actor in the constitution-making exercise. Professor Ssemateeka, what persuaded you when you are making inquiries about constitutional making to pose questionnaires of this magnitude, aware of the situation you have been going through, do you still need kingdoms? You are posing that question before the owners of the state. What was your purpose? You should be able to explain that. Now, we are in a dilemma, a big dilemma. Since I was a member of the 7th Parliament, let me tell you what exactly happened. When the government realized that the people of Uganda were still interested in the division of powers under federalism, after experiencing the report of Odoki and Professor Sempewa respectively, the government posed what they called regional tier. When the regional tier came to us in Parliament, we debated it squarely and rejected its form. Government went ahead to pass it through the influence of the NRM members. When it reached the Parliamentary Council, it is the Parliamentary Council that partially rescued us when it refused to write the word regional tier because of its excessive ambiguity. They said in legislative drafting, and I'm a small authority in that area of law, you cannot write the word regional tier. It does not exist anywhere in the world, and it is a meaningless slogan. They wrote regional government. What is in the Constitution was formulated by the Parliamentary Council of Uganda, and they clapped for her. Otherwise, regional tier, what does it mean? It does not mean anything. So the concept have protested. We are saying nobody is entitled to give us federalism. It is the people of Uganda to decide their destiny. And we have a petition in proposition which endeavors to make sure that we reform that regional governance provision squarely by saying that Uganda should be named the Federal Republic of Uganda, because the Federal Republic of Uganda reflects our adventure in the struggle for freedom. The government of Uganda is bent on letting us live the way in which we were born, and we are insisting that we should have a devolution of powers, whether it likes or not. So from now onwards, the Conservative Party is going to pray very hard that we send as many MPs as possible in Parliament, so that when we reach Parliament, we can reform squarely that lame factor of regional tier into a meaningful federal slogan. What are we saying? The time is now to warn President Museveni that enough is enough. We can no longer be governed in the way he wants us to govern under that oligarchy, which includes his wife, his sons, his so and so. That chapter must go, and it must go now. So the political parties now in the field, we are looked at as if we are underdogs, as if we are non-government organizations. We cannot talk. You, Justice Ogora, thank you for your brilliant presentation. I did not want you to stop. I wish you spoke on up to 7 p.m. tonight. Nolwekyo bagasitanda bannasange bagasitamba ntistinti ekisesitera kitusituse mwessemwe musitujje omusasajja asitajja kugesitenda era agesitenda.
Thank you, Honorable Ken Luchams. We need to make an agreement. 3 minutes is 3 minutes. All right? Yes. Okay, pass the mic on, and I'll find you wherever you are. 3 minutes, let it be 3 minutes.
Yeah, thanks very much. Our presenters. Godbert Mushabe are my names. I am the chairman of the board of CCG, and I do a couple of other things. Yeah, really, I mean, the presentations have been really spot on in terms of the nature of the crisis that we face. But you know, for me, just to bring it down, The crisis we face normally is manifest in the speech that has been given by my friend and brother, Thomas Tayobwa. Because you see, when you hold a public office, there are certain expectations on you. Whether you speak as a lawyer, which he is, whether you speak as a politician or an ordinary person. Now, but when you are a deputy speaker of parliament, and you come and speak to a public forum, and you say, one, you don't know what balance of power means. That's scary. That is completely scary. You don't know balance of power between the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. But more scary is the rationalization that the president has more power because he is elected by everybody. That's really scaring you people. Because you see, everybody, even when you go to the Constitution, everybody who holds the power in this country holds it in trust for the citizens. That power is derived from the citizens. So, essentially for us as Ugandans, under our Constitution, made by these wonderful people, we said we will have a president. And we gave the president the power of appointment. So when he appoints the Chief Justice, and because that's the major appointment he makes, the Speaker is elected. So when he appoints the Chief Justice and all the other officers, this guy is appointing them on our behalf. He's not the one who is appointing. We are the ones who gave him the power. Now the problem that we've had is that when we have leaders of the nature of the speaker, you know, you can't have a speaker who becomes a bag woman over a president. You can't. That's not a country, people. Let's be serious. Some of you have seen the speaker kneel down before a president. Surely. It's very, very disturbing that even all of us as a country, we accept it. A speaker of parliament kneeling before a president, and then it passes as if it's okay. Yeah? So I think that we have a problem now as a country because the deputy speaker was challenging me that I should go, I should contest, that I go and become an MP and be part of that group. Yeah, because you see, if you have, normally when you have a leadership in a country, you create the reason we, even all these agencies of government, the reason we give criteria and say you must have the following qualifications. You are trying to up the credibility of the institution so that it attracts the right people. Even in our small organizations, you set a criteria. We want researchers of this level. We want this because you are trying to up. Now, when you have a government that lowers the qualities and the specifications of these people, then you basically exclude those who think are very serious. I actually believe, to be honest, with all due respect, I don't think that if you are a serious Ugandan, you are aspiring to join that parliament. We have to be working to change that parliament so that we have the right people there. So I think that's the major issue that we have to deal with, that you have to be able to change the parliament. We change it, and by any means, by the way, Professor Sebe and Miria, you did a wonderful job that when the constitution is overthrown, I'm going to wind up in just a few seconds. When the constitution is overthrown, we are supposed to use any means to be able to defend that constitution. Because the 1995 constitution was overthrown. It was overthrown in 2005, and whatever remained was removed in 2017. Let me conclude by the point on age limits. Because the speaker will come and say, me, I'm for age limits, I'm for term limits, but I don't want age limits. No, but it doesn't take rocket science to know that these wise men and women who wrote that document were creating safeguards. It's not an either or. There's a safeguard of term limits. So if you are a young person like Kavera that he used, then we know you are only spending 2 terms. But there's also a safeguard of age limit which is separate and distinct from term limits. So if you are not a man like me, you know that if you are at 70, you know you can rule only for 1 term. So it's as simple as that. Does that take rocket science? Now, I find it frightening when someone like Speaker Tayewa and other high-profile people come and talk to Ugandans in that sense. You guys, we have a problem. We just need to be brutally honest with ourselves that we have to change the problem because the problem is there. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much. My name is Emyaka from Walezo Wakatiba, Guardians of the Constitution. The 2 things for me. My Lord Justice Ogola, you asked us as Ugandans to defend our Constitution. And I'm asking, how else are we going to do it? We have gone to court. We have filed petitions. The streets, we no longer have spaces. All the playgrounds, all the spaces are taken over by the military. Cannot even go to the people in Makerere cannot even protest in the Freedom Square about school, about tuition. Where else can we go? What can we do to defend our Constitution? Lastly, the Constitution for the last 30 years has only been translated into 15 languages out of the 45 that it's supposed to. Civics and political education were banned from school. No one knows about the Constitution. So it is deliberate that we do not know about the Constitution. So that's something that we need to do. What do we do in the circumstances, in the defense of the Constitution, but lawful, when the lawful means have been taken over by the boots?
Thank you so much. By virtue of my height, allow me to take the podium. Excuse me. Okay. I'm sure now you can see me, isn't it? Thank you so much. My name is Ochero Ronald Frank. I'm a medical student, 4th year at Kampala International University. Allow me first salute all the young men and women that are here today. We are the leaders of today, right? It's no longer realistic to say that we are leaders of tomorrow by virtue of our youthful population of Uganda and that of Africa that stands at an average age of 19 years, isn't it? All right, one of the areas of discussion today that has captured my attention was stability that was emphasized repeatedly by Honorable Speaker Thomas Tayebwa. But I feel like we are leaving the real question. The real question of today should not be stability, it should be sustainability. All Ugandans have seen what has happened. There is peace in the country. We are relatively stable, but it's also questionable, just like Professor Frederick has brought it in his analogy, and we have heard the speakers that have been arguing. So, stability is even questionable. The real question of today is sustainability. Yes? Okay. To have sustainability, we need to have strong and independent systems. We need to have strong and independent institutions, majorly the legislature and the judiciary, of which is arguably deniable that we do not have those systems at the moment. To have those strong systems, we need to have an empowered citizenry. We need to have an empowered generation. It is these empowered people that build strong systems. It is the strong system then that go ahead to bring about sustainability and to hold our democracy. We can go about blaming the government of today, and we can do that for years and years. As long as we do not go back to empower the generations, that these generations are going to build these strong systems, that the systems are now going to hold government accountable. Yes, our judiciary is down, our legislature is down, and that is what those in power ride on to bring about unconstitutionalism and lack of rule of law. So I would like to thank Dr. Sarah and the panelists of today that are trying to bring this discussion down to young people. It is these empowered young people that are going to rise up and build these institutions that is going to now bring about what we want, the democracy and the rule of law.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's just have 2-3 comments. We'll get to our speakers and we'll come back for another round.
My name is Egya Ronald Leonard. I am a civically active Ugandan. And I'd like to appreciate the panelists for this morning session. I was about just around 10, 11 years old when the Constitution was promulgated in 1995. As a young person who loved current affairs, my hopes were in the sky. I looked at this as the best plan for Ugandans to govern ourselves into the future. And I identified one enemy that the Constitution had taken out. The enemy was military men. So that was the enemy I identified at the time. But like they say in the military, the best plans fail at the first contact with the enemy. So the enemy, the first contact with the enemy came in 2005. Because we had a very smooth ride. I remember the wins by Dr. James Ranyarare, the late Paul Kawanga Semogerere in the Constitution and Supreme Court. They kept on showing us that we seem to be on the right path and the needle is moving one step at a time. And as young people, we had a lot of hope. Now, first contact with the enemy, 2005, term limits out. A military man had successfully emasculated the other arm of government, the legislature. The Black Mamba was the beginning of emasculation of the other arm of government, the judiciary. The rest is history. Now, my question to you, distinguished panelists. We have distinguished practitioners and jurists. And we have a distinguished former legislator. Can we stop speaking in tongues and tell Ugandans the alternative means they can use to redeem the Constitution? Because the judiciary and the legislature have been emasculated by the head of the executive. So what, can we speak a language that Ugandans will understand? What options do we have? What can we do to redeem constitutionalism for this country? Thank you very much.
Thank you. More comments?
Thank you very much. I'm going to raise a concern. You've picked so many men to speak. You don't look behind. My hand was the first up to comment. But unfortunately, the microphone was handed over to Honorable Luchamzi. I guess he's a bigger man, so you had to give him the audience. Anyway, my name is Yvonne Mpambara. I'm a social justice lawyer. Have you switched off my microphone? Oh. I was among the only 3 women that submitted forms and expressed interest to run for presidency and remove MUSEVENI. I have a comment and questions on the design of the Constitution. I know you don't want to take blame, but your great brilliant minds that sat down to draft the Ugandan Constitution from 1995. From the very onset of the design of this Constitution, especially when we look at the separation of powers, what was in the minds of the drafters when they looked at the power they were giving the president in the Constitution to appoint all the different positions that we have in the Constitution, the Electoral Commission, the IGG, the Human Rights Commission, the judiciary? What was running through the minds of the drafters on the independence of the other parts or organs of governance? If one man, okay, I'll call him a man because right now he's the one leading this country, had the power to appoint them, how will a judicial officer like a justice wake up one day and say, I'm going to impeach MUSEVENI who appointed me into the role I'm in? How would it have worked? I would love to hear how you were thinking about that, how the independence of these organs would have performed if the power was already in one man. Do we feel it was utopian for us to design our constitution that way? For parliament, it makes sense, but the executive in the constitution seems to have had a flaw. Secondly, you can't blame these people for getting power to amend the constitution as they want. If they're calling it a mere paper, it's because it has become a mere paper. If Museveni wakes up today and I've annoyed him and he says, I'm going to put a clause, a new article in the constitution that bars Yvonne from running for presidency, it's because he's been given the power to do so. Who do we blame? That's a discussion for another day. But should we then, and this is a question I'm going to pose, should we amend the clause on amendment in the Constitution and restrict it to a certain level of review that does not give power for most of these power-hungry people to just wake up and get angry and draft and redraft and amputate, like Honorable Dr. Miriam was saying, and amputate the Constitution as they will or based off emotion? Thirdly and lastly, sorry, I don't want to talk too much. I think I talked about the utopian nature of this constitution. Was it a genuine draft or document that was meant for Uganda, or we drafted it from what the colonial masters had left behind and just placed something in Uganda to try and work on? Is it realistic? Is it actually a living document? Are we genuinely saying that the constitution that we have is a living document that can work in Uganda? Thank you.
Thank you to the panelists. I'm Elizabeth Abasa from Richard, Uganda. My question is very simple and precise. As the young people, as the youth, the current surge is on us. We really agree we have a very key role to play. But when you look at the job market, when you look at the current scenarios where everything has been commercialized and most of us are disparate because we want the money and we also want a better country, what advice would you give us that as we are struggling and looking at the sieve of changing our country, and we are also looking at the commercialization of the jobs and also the interest in the jobs, what best advice would you give us to strike a balance so that we can be able to attain both and we are in a very good economic country? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Sheila Amanio, a National Unity Platform member, and mine is a message of hope. There was a gentleman who said, what do we do? Where do we go from here? And I'm here to say that NUP is the solution. For those who dared to listen to our manifesto, the day we were nominated, we had a manifesto, our NUP manifesto being read out in local district, and one of our first priority issue is to restore constitutional order. NUP will restore presidential term limits and age limits as originally enshrined in the 1995 Constitution. NUP will reverse amendments that undermine constitutional safeguards and ensure constitutional amendments require broad public participation, parliamentary and civic social scrutiny. Basically, our focus is going to make sure we protect the Constitution of Uganda. So give us an opportunity as National Unity Platform, and we shall bring this country back to order. Thank you very much. Amanio Sheila, Woman Representative, Mukono District.
Thank you so very much for the opportunity. My name is Vatesa Kasfa-Matene, a student at Makerere University Business School in my final year. And I'm going to be so very brief. And before I forget, let me start with someone that has just given us hope by going to the National Unity Platform. My question is, what exactly are we going to do and what change do you people have? Because these are the promises that most of the politicians have been giving to us. They want us to go to their parties, but it is the same story. Do you have anything? These are the same things you've been saying from the time we've entrusted your MPs. What have they been doing in Parliament? You should have done examples. You should have given us examples by the MPs we sent to Parliament. That's when we should maybe have believed what your president has for us. But the fact that they are also doing the same as the previous ones, we cannot take that. I am part of the youth that need the hope. So that's why I'm reacting on that. And another thing, I am going to react about someone that talked about peace and sustainability in the country. And my question is, what do we consider as peace? Or where is the peace? People think that peace is all about them not having a war in the country. But that's not what all peace is all about. What is peace when I do not know what I'm going to do with my degree after the 3 years in university? What is peace when I do not know what I'm going to do with all the money that my parents have spent in me, and I will be on the streets looking for a job like I never went to school? We've seen so many youth on the streets struggling to make ends meet, and these people went to school. They did not just go to school, but they also performed very well. But they have nowhere else to go, and you come and peace to the country without providing a solution for them. Really? Is that what we want to call peace? Of course not. And another thing, let's have more of the sensitization about this constitution thing. If it is possible, let's translate it to all the languages so that everyone can get to know about their rights. Let's make sure everyone knows about their rights. Thank you so much.
Check. I'm going to come back in round two. I request that we go back to the panelists, and then I'm going to come back in round two, and which will all have an opportunity to speak. I would like panelists to respond to some of the questions that were raised today.
Am I heard? Question was raised by my friend Ken Richamuzi. But I think, and he talked more about it, but I think he didn't elaborate the greater issue, which is normally summed up in the Buganda question. Many of our young generation are not caught up in this, but it still lingers on. The short history of it is that people like him and me were brought up by Uganda. This thanks to colonial policy of divide and rule. Buganda was separated from Uganda and given special treatment. So we grew up with those sentiments. For me, I never knew there was a Uganda until around maybe 1961, when there were discussions for independence and so on. Otherwise, everything that mattered came from a Uganda government, Kabaka's government. Is that not so? So, when we started collecting views, there was this talk about federal, which you should distinguish from federalism. Federal is the discussions and the emotions and the demands for the special treatment of Uganda, returning to the 1962 Constitution, which envisaged Uganda as almost a separate entity with a government and nominal institutions. Some of these institutions were very nominal, a high court, police, and so on. That's the constitution. It pleased Uganda because it maintained the colonial status of Uganda within Uganda. But things kept changing, and when we were collecting views, federal and federalism was being confused by either those people who did not those who are demanding for federal and others who are demanding for federalism. Federalism is separate, it is a higher degree of devolution, a higher degree of decentralization, let's say, where powers are strictly separated between a government at the center and the local units. And me, I support devolution, which is nearest to federalism. And in the collection of views, I was telling my fellow Uganda that rather than demand federal, look at a system of federalism which cuts across Uganda, not a separate status for Buganda. Because then it will be welcome for the whole of Uganda. But if it looks like you want federal, which is a special status, it's not going to work in the new developments now that we are in Uganda. Whereas as I grew up in Uganda, not Uganda. But applies to most others because they also grew up in separate entities in Ankole, Choli, and so on and so on. So that's where we are. We can still rediscuss the issue of federalism, or at least a higher degree of devolution. Because of what I spoke this morning, that we have gone astray. We have re-centralized. And during that discussion, we can have a honest talk. Because some of these things we are hiding. When you want to talk openly, you fear that you'll be called sectarian, and we are cowed. The people, when you listen, they are talking, but you see, there is a certain ethnic domination in this country, but they speak quietly. But that is going to cause fire, So these are matters we need to have a new conversation about, and say we are now aspiring to be Uganda. We have so far failed to be a Uganda. Let's see how we can live together. It is surprising. When we overthrew Idi Amin here, there were a lot of expectations, and we speak some languages. We must detribalize the army, because this had happened before. The army had been dominated by people in the north, Acholis and Langis, and that was terrible. Then Amin came up and slaughtered the Acholis and Langis, and they packed the army with the people from Koboko and Sudan and so on. And we thought all this should go. Now we are quiet. We talk quietly and see is somewhere. It's welcome because you have fewer local units, strong, empowered, and as an alternative check to central government. It's welcome. What is in doubt is federal. I hope I've made the difference between federal and federalism. A special status. Yeah. Now I am happy that a young lady there has put up an argument. What is peace? When she qualifies and she has no job and so on and so on. That's very, 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 very serious, very important. Yes, as Emilia is saying, peace is not absence of war. The thing, or absence of sleep, the thing is, there is what we call human development, overall human development. Maybe what the young man said is he probably sees that as sustainability. But you cannot have peace without overall human development. So no one in this country is seriously discussing. The speaker there was casual. The parliament should discuss development and cross-check with the executive. Where are we going as far as human development is concerned? What are matters of population, of what we are going to do with the unemployment, and so on. These are all contributors to what you call stability. And they are basic. The letter of the law, the Constitution, depends on these basics. And therefore, this is why you see that we have governments that lack legitimacy, because they have neglected the human development. If you get lopsided projects like PDM, which is giving money to a few individuals, how can you develop through gifts? You cannot. So you give me the gift when my children are hungry. I have to buy this and that to pay school fees. Yes, there's no mechanism for collecting these gifts back in terms of indebtedness and so on and so on. This is not development, you see. So I think this discussion can go on and on and on, but the other question about members of parliament we select, again, we lack sensitization. And this has been brought about because, again, of lack of human development. Now, what we have, because of unemployment and the power of incumbency, the urge to stay in power, the politics we have now is politics of investment from top to bottom. If you want, you have nothing else to do, you want to develop, go and invest in politics. And how are you going to recoup that money? You've had these primaries, people paying, in NRM I'm told the people were paying billions for, I don't know whether it's true, but for being nominated. Billions. Now, beyond that, you are going to pay the electorate a few other billions. So that's an investment. And how are you going to get that money back? Tell me. It's corruption. Anyway, let me stop here and give my colleagues the chance to respond.
Is to judge what we are saying. Thank you very much, Professor. I am glad you have answered Richam's demand, because he was saying, I did not acknowledge 1962 Constitution. Because 92 Constitution was not made by Ugandans. 62, 62, it was made in Lancaster House there. I don't know where Lancaster was. Me, I was in P what or P2 or whatever. All we did, they came with these flags and they took us at the sub-county chief and we drank soda for the first time. We were dancing and so that was not a constitution made by Ugandans. I'm not saying, I mean, if you are going to deliver Uganda and maybe, how do I give an example of a bearing a child? When you, I don't know. But if Uganda was born by other people who are not Ugandans, I don't know, is that a prodigal child or is a bastard? I don't know. But there are some of you men, you are bearing children who are not yours. That's why the DNA these days is doing something. So Uganda was birthed by people who were not what? Ugandans. They went there in Lancaster, they took some people, yes. They told them, do this. They said yes. That's why that constitution actually could not last. We need to know the background, what was happening. By that time, Ugandans got their so-called independence. The Ugandans, the Musaze, the rest of them were really, they said enough is enough, which we lack right now. They said enough is enough, and those colonizers say, where we have reached, let us leave these people. And so the constitution which was made, surely when you look at it, because we studied it, it was not going to work even much because there were certain issues which are crucial, but they could not be settled. I was not there, but I think the colonialists were saying, let us leave these people go, and the Ugandans were saying, let us go, we shall sort out things when we reach home. I think that's what it was. When they came to sort out things when they reached home, things were never sorted out and the problems went on. So I'm not unrecognizing it, but I'm saying the first constitution to be popularly made by Ugandans was that 1995. Because nobody can question it. You see, many of you people don't read. Do you know, Professor, the other day, certain press people, you know, these press people disturb me because my biggest talent is my mouth, so they seek it out. Somebody, imagine, rang me and said, I want you to comment because we know, we have seen that the secretary, you know, Father Warigo, that Father Warigo went to seminarians, that the seminarians made the draft that was presented. I said, you fool, I didn't wait. I said, you fool, where do you come from? Because the professor, remember, we used to do retreat. And when we had come out with this document, we said, let's go to a retreat. I think is it Karanga or somewhere, where you find a garden, and if there is a church or a seminar or what, I can't remember what. Does that mean when you take a retreat at Turweza there, then you are in the church over preaching, you brought priests to do the work? So I said, shut up and leave me alone. So many of you, really, if you love Uganda and you are patriots, there is that Odoki report, I'm sure it is somewhere, the Odoki report, the Dutch Commission report, where we put everything, because we reached everywhere, all professionals, everybody, they put their views. Do you know we took 4 years? 4 years, some of us are sick. In that exercise, I had a disc degeneration, and up to now, and yet I was thrown out of service without even pension or anything. I'm just taking care of myself. But we suffered. We would sleep at 3 o'clock and wake up at 5, and we are already working in darkness and going through terrible roads. When I see people who just criticize, and were very distinguished, intelligent, and patriotic Ugandans, who were making this constitution. And that's why we thought, for me, when I received that constitution, actually, I wanted to behave like the moment it was promulgated and I got it into my hand, I wanted to behave like this man called Simeon in the church. You know Simeon? When he went to church and saw Jesus Christ and prayed, God, you can take me now that I've seen Jesus. But you know, women are resilient. I remember there was that woman called Hannah. For her, when she saw Jesus, she went preaching about Jesus. So I said, I'm not going to be like Simeon, I will be like Hannah and go back to Parliament. Otherwise, I had thought, I've finished, I want to go back to Parliament. But then I remembered I've got to make laws that will translate into this constitution into action. So I went back to Parliament. But we really did a good job, and thank you, Professor, for explaining this federalism and federal. I wouldn't have explained it that way, but for me, what I know, the Baganda wanted federal. They were the only people who wanted federal, who wanted kingdom, the only ones. And we said, the only people who also mentioned something about federal, and then it brought it to our mind when we recommended the decentralization, were the people of Mbari. They said federal. We said federal, but you don't have, what they wanted kingdom. No, federal. Then we said, why? They said, you know, we have our coffee here. And we have our coffee, we make it, and then the central government, that government takes it and we benefit nothing. So we want to manage our coffee and they also get rich from our coffee. That's when we said, this will be decentralization. Decentralizing power from up there and giving power to the districts so that they can raise their resources, manage themselves, and that decentralization was eventually put in that constitution, except now there is total decentralization. I don't know what happened this parliament. Anyway, so we couldn't recommend federal because we looked, how could federalism means you are federating with other people. But now how could Uganda federate with the whole of Uganda? We couldn't. So that's how we said when he was explaining to them that, for me, we were saying, how can one state, is it a state, central state, federalize alone. These days I have new English. So that is on the issue of federal. Chamsi, that is on the issue of federal. By the way, if you don't know, your president, your presidential candidate, came to my home to look for me, so that we can work together. I don't know whether you sent him. I was surprised. Somebody called me, can I see your name? But I'm at home. Then I say, oh, delegation. I say, I'm done. But now there it is. So that is the issue of federal. And by the way, Richard, let me reveal this to you. Professor told you that for him what he knew was Uganda. When we went out there to get the people's views, I tell you, one big challenge was Uganda. Uganda wanted to be a nation of its own. They were not recognizing other nations. In fact, if Uganda was at the border, in ourselves, in our commission, we said if Uganda was at the border, we would have recommended secession. Yes, so that it can be an independent country and manage its own things. But because it was at the center of this country, we couldn't recommend that. And then the other question was the language. We had wanted to develop a national language. But even in that CA, how? We cannot bring Swahili. So we are here, we want unity, we can't speak together. And that was the main thing we said, but we need a national language. How could we be united as a nation when we cannot communicate with one another? We said, let us bring a national language. But do you know what Ugandans were saying around? They are saying, yes, in fact, we could bring Uganda as the national language and develop it as a national language. But those people are already proud they don't acknowledge that we exist. If we give them the opportunity to have their language, then we are finished. Me, I speak the truth. These are the things they would have wanted because they said it is central. We can manage to speak here and there, but they will stand on us and we shall suffer. So the language, and indeed when we reached in CA and we said national language, let's bring Swahili. It was mainly the Uganda people, no, we must bring a local language. And they knew theirs would be adopted easier than the rest. And then we lost out on the national language. Up to now, we don't have a national language. This is, I was about to use the other word. Now, I've finished all that. So, Chamdi, you better think about Uganda. It's high time Ugandans look at Uganda and know we are Ugandans. You don't know the people, the views they were bringing. When you say those people in the north, those are animals, those are Dokoro. Then you say these Banyang, those are what, Vararo. Eh? And then you go to Ankole, they say, those Baganda are thieves and they kunyomasi. All these things, they were coming. And we gathered and corrected and said, good, we are going to build a Uganda. And indeed, we put a constitution, by the way, everybody in the world, they acknowledge that constitution as a wonderful constitution. I'm telling you, I wish it was implemented. Now let me answer the question that provoked me most. It was a lady, I don't know her name. You social lawyer? Yvonne. Yes, Yvonne, I don't know when you were born, and I don't know your age or environment in which you grew, but for us, when we were making this constitution, I'm telling you, it was about was it like 8 years of NRM, or it was 86, 89, about within 3 years. That's when we started gathering the views for this constitution. I want to tell you honestly that in Uganda, do you know what they call born again? When revival, like the revival of the Barokore in whatever, when they came. Ugandans were like revival. They were like born again. They are speaking the truth. They are talking their mind. And they were giving us all these views, and they were intelligent, and there was no greed, and it was about Uganda, it was about all that kind of thing. That is the environment in which we made that constitution. And the environment can determine what you decide in that constitution. Like if you have to make a new one or now, I am sure the issues which would be considered right now as very, very prominent could be different. So, this mentality of judging the people who made the constitution and in fact condemning them and seeing things which are done wrongly by those who are implementing the constitution, and you judge the ones who made it and credit them or abuse or think they were sensible, they were not thinking wisely, they were that kind of thing. It is completely wrong. You need to read, you need to take care of the environment and see what we put there. And as you were talking, I wanted to ask you, what would you have put there yourself? Because even right now, the questions you are asking, you should ask yourselves. You are saying, tell us, so what can we do? What can you do? Go and find it out. I will the one tell you what you should do. That's nonsense. So now let me answer directly. And I'm answering your question which I had answered already. She said, I want to ask you, what was in your mind really? In other words, your mind was lost or you were nonsense or whatever. What was in your mind when you gave the whole of power? Let me even stand. what was in our mind, Professor here, just Sodochi, Professor Tim, we were many, even the Emyaka was there with us. We were 21, just my tomb. There was no fish. There was no fisherwoman or fisherman. You know what I mean? Hey, there was no fisherman or fisherwoman among those distinguished, elegant, patriotic people of Uganda, and our great man, Sam Njuba, God rest his soul in peace. The man who had suffered for Uganda when I was still a student, he was also my lecturer. But he fought and they fought, they were arrested them, imprisoned them. Those were the people who were now ready to make the new Uganda set off. Now, I explained to you that when we were giving power to the president, not to MUSEVENI, but the president of Uganda, we said, when anything is done wrong, who is blamed? Who is blamed? President. When it is done well, who is praised? President. So we said, so that means that president, and we had looked at the centralized power of Obote. Do you know he was also choosing chiefs for the other chiefs and all that kind of thing? We said, no, we must decentralize, we must reduce the powers of the president. So how do we reduce them? We said now, this man or woman is the one responsible for the nation, is accountable, is the final answer. Therefore, he has a right to look for people who can work with him, whom he knows so and so, this one, because of experience, because of whatever, they would get their qualification, they would do all that, and he chooses them. The word nomination, he had the power to nominate the judges, the chief justice, the cabinet, because those are the people who are going to lead this institution and work with him. But he did not have power to appoint them without the approval of the parliament. What's wrong? You didn't hear that. Without approval of parliament. Because we said for him he was elected as one. But Ugandans elected other people and gave them the power, as the Article 1 says. The power belongs to the people. They gave the president their power. They gave the members of parliament their power. And they said, go and work for us. And this is what we want you to do for us. Okay? And now, the president refuses or abuses that provision. Because he's supposed to nominate. Actually, he didn't abuse. I don't know whether you call it abuse. He nominates. Do you know that even when he appointed this past deputy, when he appointed this last deputy chief justice, he was not supposed to do that. Didn't you listen to his lordship? He even declared that you are doing wrong. But the person continued and became the what? He was not supposed to appoint the deputy chief justice. They sent two names. He was supposed to choose one of the chief justice, and then they will submit those for deputy. But for him, he says, I choose both, and they go. Now, you say, Matembe, you gave that authority. He never gave that authority. He was abusing it. He nominates people to parliament. And the moment he bought parliament with 5 million, that was the beginning of taking over parliament. Now, if he took over parliament, should we be the ones who should be blamed that what was in our mind? What was in our mind was very wise and sensible and 100% correct. And if it had been followed, all these things would not be what? Would not be a problem. You know, for instance, if you want to know, when we put movement, for instance, that it will continue for the first 5 years, people condemn us for that. But we traverse the whole of Uganda. Many Ugandans were saying, we continue with the movement. It is very good. For how long? Others said forever. Others said 100 years. Others said 50 years. Others said 20. Then some small minority said, no, we go multi-party. So here we were wise people. We said, so what do we do now? We looked at it, we said, people want the movement as for now. So for now, let's say the first 5 years, we continue with what? With this movement. But you never know what will happen in these 5 years. Therefore, we recommended a referendum. That people would go again and choose whether they still want the movement or they don't want. And you know very well, even if there was no referendum, by the end of those 5 years, Ugandans were fed up. Because the movement had turned into almost a one-party state. And we had said in the Constitution we can't have a one-party state. By that time the multi-party, was allowed, it was almost a one-party state. It was being captured and that kind of thing. So you see, that one we were wise. If we had put okay movement permanent, it would have been a problem. And now when it comes, for instance, to the qualifications, let me tell you, Ugandans those days were very wise. They loved Uganda. They wanted a change. They were determined. And they knew what a member of parliament meant. And that's why they said, let us have only graduates. They had said they wanted only graduates to be members of parliament. But we, who were looking at the Constitution, the principle of equality, the principle of unity, there were those principles. And we knew that in Uganda here, not everybody was a graduate. And we knew there were some areas where you don't even find a single graduate. And therefore, whom would they elect? We were reasoning. So we said, okay, these people wanted a graduate. Since they want a graduate, for us, let's put minimum qualifications. We said that minimum should be senior 6. And we thought, and we knew that time, or we believed, that since these people want a graduate, when a graduate comes with a non-graduate, then they will choose whom they want. And those where there is no graduate, they will choose at least a minimum of senior 6. We can't explain all these things to you. You only condemn. But we were doing the right job, and we are proud of it. We never regret. You go and abuse those who are thieves, who have become greedy, who have become nonsense, who are hopeless, the fishermen and the fisherwomen who are there. For instance, if I ask you one question, who is the Minister for Ethics and Integrity? Who knows her name? Up to now when I'm passing, oh, minister. And yet about 5 or 6 ministers followed me. Where are they? So stop condemning us. Now I'm going to end with this question of you saying, what do we do? Somebody said, what is a genuine Uganda? Hey, you are the same lady who said that, was this constitution which we made, was it really genuine, or it was because of colonial people who imposed on us? I want to tell you, go and read that report of Odochi and read the constitution itself, totally genuine, not influenced by any foreigner at all. And not influenced by MUSEVENI, by the way, like you people say. Not influenced by MUSEVENI. And I remember when we passed that constitution, the only challenge President MUSEVENI had was the land. He said it had the promulgation. And I think he was to a certain extent right. Because for us, we said all land belongs to the people. So if the land belongs to the people, if the state wants to do certain things here and there, where will it get the land from? He raised it there, but for us, we are clapping. The land has come back to us because they had taken it. But now it is even going. Is it the constitution which is now giving away that land? Okay, it was genuine. Now, finally, the question, alternative means What options do we have? What can we do? Stop asking us. We played our part. Our role is to tell you what is going on, and for you is to think and see what you can do. Have you heard? And these are guiding principles on what you can do. Stop fear. Be courageous and patriotic. Have you heard? You can't fear death. Can you fear what will happen to you? People ask me, Matende, you don't fear. Fear who? President Museveni is a human being like me. All those military people are human beings like, you see that Sarah there? Isn't she still alive? When time comes for you to go, you will go. Because it is not us who determine when we go. Stop fearing. Be courageous. Stop. And number 2, stop corruption. ESCO values, moral degeneration. You just bow for anything. Stop that. Renew your mind. There is a need for attitudinal change. Renew your mind and change your attitudes. And stop blaming anybody, everybody. Blame yourself. In fact, for me, I say, we should stop blaming those people who are in power. For them, they are greedy, they are self-centered, they want power. Why are we giving it to them? Why? Do you see the rallies? See all those grabbing from her? You are following it.